I take us back to some basics. So voluntary medical male circumcision, VMMC. So you're going to hear a lot of VMMC being thrown around. It is voluntary medical male circumcision for HIV prevention. It was proven to work from what scientists call randomized controlled trials. These are very large trials involving thousands of people, and they were conducted, 3 trials were conducted in Uganda, in South Africa, and in Kenya around 2003 to 2005. Those are the trials that originally gave us the definitive evidence that circumcising males prevents them from getting HIV from HIV-infected women. So that is a very important part of so after about 2 years, WHO and UNAIDS recommended that 13 priority countries where there was high incidence of HIV or there was very high rates of HIV infections and low coverage of male circumcision should roll out this intervention as part of combination prevention, as you heard. So I wanted to just take a step back for us to be on the same page about where circumcision comes. We have compelling evidence, and in fact, we have seen after 2007 is a really long time ago. We have seen evidence in communities where circumcision has been rolled out, and the protective effect actually goes higher. We've seen it, research showing that it goes as high as 75% in communities, and we're seeing also, as we'll see in the call to action, actual new infections going down in their hundreds of thousands. So it is a very important part of combination prevention. And also the benefits are not just to the men, the benefits are to the women, because when men are circumcised, their likelihood of passing on HIV obviously to their partners rather when men are circumcised, the chance of getting HIV is reduced by 60%. But also cervical cancer to women is also reduced. So benefits both to the men and to the women, and at the community level, we're seeing less and less HIV in communities because of circumcision. So I wanted to start there. And then for the call to action, as you heard from Simba, it's the second one in just over 10 years. We like to do this because the energy it helps to build energy, helps to build momentum. And the calls, we have 8 calls in the call to action, each of them targeted at different audiences to help get them to move. And I'm going to, at this point, call up my colleague Chilufia to take us through the first 2 key calls to action. Chilufia, over to you.
Thank you, Angelo. Good afternoon, everyone. Accelerating VMMC for HIV prevention is very pivotal for us to get to 2030. Firstly, I would like to draw your attention on why this is very important. We want to employ stakeholders to do their part and work together and to realize the priorities for VMMC. This cannot happen in vacuum, so we want to see stronger partnerships and prioritization. I would like to draw your attention to the first call to action, which is leadership and governance. For us to see acceleration becoming a reality, it will require ministries of health and finance to start prioritizing funding for VMMC in our countries. Without countries taking ownership, it will be very difficult for us to get to where we want to get by 2030. And also, it is very imperative that when we plan for these programs like VMMC, there is need to monitor policy. We need to also track progress. How are we doing in our programs? That is very important. Apart from that, we have the VMMC scorecard. We need to track the progress, check how the commitments that are made now, how they are doing, and this can be done annually using the VMMC scorecards. The governments are not the only partners or stakeholders that have a huge role to play. We call on civil society. As you know, this year World AIDS Day theme is Communities Lead, and civil society has been one of the leading leaders in VMMC. We ask them to spearhead these efforts, which should culminate in concrete and social compact. The second call is funding and sustainability. Post-COVID, we have seen so many programs have lost kind of some of the gains that were there. Now, more than ever, we want to employ multinational funding agencies to actually now re-energize and bring the funding that was there pre-COVID. And from the current 167 million US dollars to at least 250 million per annum. This is very important. An additional fund is needed for innovation. When we are talking programs being done unusual, that will require innovation. And for innovation to happen, there is need for a dedicated fund to be allocated. And in view of this fund, we envision that it will actually contribute to greater efficiency and effectiveness over the next 5 years. And this also calls for integration. We know that HIV prevention services and reproductive services cannot be divided, because we're trying to cater for the needs of young men who should be actually targeted. Many times we hear it's difficult to find men, and VMMC presents an opportunity to find these men and bring them in care. We also want to employ ministries of health, again, and health, to commit to an incremental increase in their domestic funding. While we appreciate all the efforts that they are putting in, we want to see an increment to ensure that we sustain the gains. And this should be done in the next 2 years with a clear timeline and milestones for implementation. The most other important partner is the private sector. The private sector plays a very important role, and more than ever we are calling them to the call. Can they come and be part of acceleration of HIV prevention for VMMC? And this presents them an opportunity to actively participate as significant partners in co-funding VMMC commodities and create mechanisms that tap private medical insurance as a means for sustainable funding. Thank you so much. I'm going to call upon my colleague Kenneth Muhego from HEPS in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Kenneth has introduced. So I'll go straight to call number 3, which is around health service delivery. But before that, I want to draw back to the times of COVID. VMMC was one of the programs that was badly affected by COVID. We were the first to be dropped and our program stopped. So reinvigorating VMMC programming is critical now that we are back to full operations. Under health service delivery, we call upon all our government ministries to fast track the differentiated service delivery models for VMMC. And here we are talking of the people-centered care and going and finding these men in communities. My colleague talked about finding them into care, finding men into care. It's a problem, but we believe this is a golden opportunity to leverage on as an entry for men into care. We know VMMC is not only preventing HIV, but also there is cervical cancer for our women. So we could leverage on that and ensure that we are bringing all the men back into care. Then we also call upon the multilaterals. We know VMMC has been heavily donor funded as a vertical program, but we are calling for integration. And as we're integrating and transitioning, we call upon these multilaterals to build the local capacity of our clinicians to conduct these male circumcisions. We now have new technologies, like the Shangri, which can be easily done, a surgical done by anyone who is non-medical. So the task shifting now is more realistic because we have technologies that can easily be operated by the non-medical person if well trained. And we also call upon civil society to lead this accountability work. And in particular, I know these days we have what we call community-led monitoring, but it's a shame that we're not monitoring programs like VMMC, but we call upon that leadership of holding our governments accountable, our duty bearers accountable, to ensuring that VMMC is also prioritized. Then when we go to call number 4, it's around global and regional advocacy. And here we call upon multinationals to keep VMMC on the national agenda. by providing platforms. We have multinationals like PEPFAR, we have Global Fund, we now have the foundations, we have the WHO and the UN agencies. They all have platforms that talk about other programs, and we need this for VMMC as well, because it's them that have a bigger voice, have a bigger coverage, and we need them to also promote VMMC, have materials that promote VMMC, and also make it sexy like the other programs, if you like. Then we also call upon, the other is around having partnerships and collaborations, and I think that's the new thing now. Even with PEPFAR, the new strategy, talking about partnerships and collaborations, even at national and subnational level, we need this coordination, both from the global level. We need these steering committees, and also at subnational and national level, improved coordination and building these partnerships with all stakeholders, with the civil society, with religious leaders, with our local governments. We need everyone together to ensure that VMC programming is also integrated in all our main programs. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Angela.
Thank you, Kenneth. So we have heard the 5 of them. The first one, leadership and governance, funding and sustainability is the second, health services delivery is the third, global and regional advocacy is the fourth, partnerships and collaboration is the fifth, and the sixth one that I'm covering is innovation and commodities. Kenneth said something about the shangring. It's a different way of doing a circumcision without actually doing a surgery. And it has many benefits, of course, including it's another choice that men and boys can choose from, but also for the medical people, it takes about 6 or 7 minutes less for them to do a circumcision using a shangring than to do a conventional surgery. That's precious time in the healthcare system. So it's important that we get commodities such as the shangring to be rolled out. The other thing also around innovation is manufacturers and distributors and Ministry of Health to collaborate to meet the demand for services and ensure a robust supply of the commodities needed to ensure that VMMC is rolled out. And again, you're hearing us saying a lot of things about multilaterals. They are also important players in the innovation and commodities area, and they must maintain that support. And also support for the rollout, but also really importantly, support for research so that we can continue to innovate. And then finally, the Ministries of Health to ensure that they invest in piloting new innovations when they come, adopting them, and then swiftly expanding them when they come. The seventh key call to action is around communication and demand creation. How does it help us to develop all these innovations if the communities that we're targeting do not even know the services are available? So we call upon the Ministries of Health and key partners, again including civil society, to develop impactful and meaningful communication strategies and campaigns to ensure that demand is created for male circumcision services. And then finally, civil society is the voice of the communities, to remain in touch with those communities and to mobilize them and to ensure that young men, awareness is raised among young men and boys so that they can continue to seek these services. I'm sure they have concerns. Civil society can help in dispelling those concerns, addressing those concerns and dispelling any myths in those communities. And then the final one, Chiluka is going to cover it, and then we'll hand over to Sindra, and then we'll take your question. So I'll invite Chiluka back to wrap us up.
Thank you, Angelo. Our last call to action is number 8, strategic information and accountability. We'd like to see the government to invest in data. We want to see investment in information systems that track the progress. And this data is what is going to inform us whether we're making progress or not. This is very important. While we appreciate that government has been investing already, but we want them to go a step further and keep investing in information system and and also to ensure that accountability mechanisms are enhanced, because only then can each and every partner be held accountable and play their part. And this will require having continuous correction and evaluation of VMMC programs, regular updates on progress and challenges, and this should be disseminated and not be kept under lock and key. It has to be disseminated both at national forums and global scale. The job is not done yet. Thank you. Angelo mentioned in the preamble, we don't only care for men, we also care for women as well. As you heard, VMMC not only offers HIV prevention, but it also offers protection against cervical cancer for women. So more than ever, it is very important because we'll be tackling two challenging things that women have to grapple with. Thank you.
So thank you, Sindra, for that question. You very well know now it's about a choice-driven prevention agenda. And VMMC is part of the combination prevention. What works for me is not what works for another person, and VMMC is one of those prevention options that prevents men from contracting HIV, and that's why we are calling upon all stakeholders to prioritize it as part of the combination prevention and also give it the same traction as other prevention options. Thank you for that question. Sorry, I didn't get your name. Yes, we know there are competing priorities for our governments, but we also have targets to meet, and that's ending AIDS by 2030. And we can't end AIDS without preventing. I had to use this example of closing the tap before you mop the floor. You have to stop the water running if you're to mop the floor and it dries up. And without that, we will lose the epidemic if we don't invest in prevention. And I've talked of combination prevention, and we're not pitting one prevention option against the other. We want the entire comprehensive package prioritized by our governments and not looking at only PrEP or looking at only condoms. We need prevention options. We need the choices to end AIDS by 2030. I know the last mile is difficult to get to, but this is the time we need commitment from our governments, especially now that donors are transitioning. They're talking of sustainability, and that's government owning this response. And we need all these proven, scientifically proven tools to ensure that they are fully implemented, taken to scale, if we are to end AIDS by 2030.
Yeah, I'm going to add something, and this is also why this call to action is important. We're documenting this, and we're going to be using this for the next 5 or so years to go to these government departments to tell them this is what we want you to do, and this is what the results of that is going to be. And Michael, you might ask, where are they going to get this money to prioritize VMMC amidst all of the other priorities? I'm going to use the example of, you are our hosts here in Zimbabwe. You have the AIDS levy. Zimbabwe has been going through a hyperinflation for many, many years, right? I will tell you this, around 2012, Zimbabwe was depending mostly on donor funding for the HIV program. But through the AIDS levy, subsequent years, by the year 2016-2017, 86% of the funding for the Zimbabwe HIV program was coming from the domestic resources, despite the hyperinflation. So where there is a will for governments to do this, there will be a way for them to take care of the priorities that they set. So we are using that as an example to say, Uganda, come on board. Kenya, come on board. Let's find the resources. We know what the priorities are. Let's find the resources to be able to meet them. And let's prioritize VMMC because the job is not yet done. Thank you.
Therefore, for them to accept your ways, because one of them, we've spoken one further, said we are not willing to have you guys come and maybe do that on our people. So I just want to get a clarification. Thank you.
I'll start and my colleagues can come in. That's a really, really important question. And it goes back to the role of civil society. Civil society is going to continue to play an important role to ensure that important community issues such as that one included into the programs. So one of the things that programs have done is to, first of all, engage the leaders in those traditionally circumcising communities to enable them to really have a good appreciation of male circumcision as an intervention. We are not coming to change your culture. We're not coming to change what you've been doing, but your people are also dying. You have people getting HIV, right? So one of the, in fact, one of my, he became my friend, is a chief in Zambia called Chief Mumena. His community actually wasn't, it used to be circumcising like hundreds of years ago. They stopped. And then HIV came, they started research, they had to start circumcising again. One of the fears he had as a chief was that the neighboring chiefdom, they were a traditionally circumcising community, and they would be laughed at for embracing circumcision when they were not. But the chief had to make a decision. Do I let my people continue to get HIV and be proud and use pride to make that decision, or do I embrace science and what it's going to bring to me? So in the same way for the traditionally circumcising communities, what's been done, for example, in South Africa, is to take the boys especially through all of the rituals concerning the traditional practices, but the actual procedure is done by a medical person from that community. So that is, in a way, you're showing the community, we appreciate your culture, we understand your culture, but traditionally circumcising there's no research that has shown that is a full circumcision, a complete circumcision that will offer protection against HIV. Therefore, we're going to use the method that we know, which is, scientifically proven. But the other things, also the other thing they do is, there are some unsafe practices that go with traditional circumcision. So in some communities, they put earth on the penis right after it's been traditionally circumcised. They leave the boys, you're supposed to use any cleaning, So some of those unsafe practices, we deal with them, we take them away so that infections are averted and so on and so forth. We had many amputations actually of boys when those things are done. So bringing that awareness to communities, to traditional leaders, and involving the communities in those practices. Again, finding medical people who are from those communities has helped a lot to embrace circumcision as an intervention. I don't know if my colleagues have anything else to add. Cool. Does that address your question, Miras?
One is the community mobilization that we talked about through their leaders, or what we call community gatekeepers, the people they believe in, and sharing with them the importance of circumcision in preventing HIV in my country. One of the districts now, and a district is the lowest unit, subnational administrative unit. It has one of the highest incidents now in the country, but traditionally they do not circumcise. So using data on that and engaging their leaders is one way of mobilizing communities that do not traditionally circumcise to get on board for circumcision. But we need efforts from everyone. We don't have all the answers to like some of those. Of course, there is hesitancy as well in circumcision, but it's through empowerment with information, with data, with the science, that communities accept and take on circumcision.
Along with the programs came some very intensive communications campaigns, radio, visibility, all that stuff. Anyone else? Any questions?
Right. So I'll just take a chance on that. So if something is proven to work and then it becomes WHO pre-qualified, then the donors can buy it and distribute it. As far as the Shrine Ring goes, I don't know the status.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we have this call to action is actually to make governments prioritize and use data that is coming from research to actually answer the questions that communities are grappling with. And one good example is the shangring. So since the shangring has proved to work, we actually are asking governments and multilaterals to invest because it has shown that it works. Thank you.
Actually, for Zimbabwe, I would actually encourage you to this morning was a very good presentation by Dr. Nehemiah Nando. Find him, and he's presented today about what going on about the shangring right here in Zimbabwe and how they're rolling it out. So I encourage you to reach out. His name is Dr. Nehemiah Nando.
I want to, just to add to that, because I just found out that the shangring is pre-qualified by the WHO, so donors like PEPFAR and Global Fund can purchase it, and so that's, I think, is upon the members, the civil society, to get into their CCMs and write it into their concept notes so that they get funded for the shangring.
Good question, and an important one. Also one that we discussed this morning with WHO and UNAIDS in that same session where Dr. Nando presented his work, and we could not agree with you more. Speaking from the civil society side, that we need consistency, and we know that sexual debut for many boys and girls is a lot lower now. So, and as Ken was saying, like, it's easier to close the tap than to continue to keep mopping. So the message that we're giving right now, the guidance, one of the reasons, actually the main reason behind the decision by WHO to keep the age at 15 is that to try to get to the 2030 goals. The goal right now is let's stop new infections right now, and at the moment a lot of those infections are not happening in the boys younger than 15. So with the limited resources that we have, can we get those who we know for sure they are sexually active right now, so that we can get to, they're not at risk at the moment, get the most high risk group, get them circumcised, and then as we work towards getting additional financial resources to mobilize. But for us, again, as civil society, we will say, let's find funding, because these boys are eventually going to become 15. Let's not wait for them to get to 15 to find the money. So we are with you. And as you who are writing, keep the pressure on. We are going to be doing our job on the other side to keep the pressure on for funders to continue funding. But at the same time, male circumcision works for all boys. It doesn't, and men. It doesn't work for, it's not that it no longer works for those under 15. What WHO and UNAIDS are saying to governments, if you can secure funding for boys younger than 15, please roll out those programs. Rwanda is rolling out these programs still. They were able to secure funding for their boys younger than 15, and no one is stopping anyone from circumcising them. It's just that right now, the priority to be able to get to the 2030 goals is for 15 and older, because they are high risk and want to get them. Thank you.
Wait, stay up here. If there's no more questions, I just want to, can you speak to the clarification that we're dealing with specifically 15 countries and not the globe?
Yes. In 2007, when WHO and UNAIDS recommended male circumcision to be added to the biomedical to the toolbox of prevention, they identified 13 priority countries, and these were again countries where there was high levels of new infections of HIV and low levels of male circumcision. So it's Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Botswana, and so on. Over years, they've added 2 additional countries. I think that's Ethiopia and South Sudan. They're now 15 countries. All of those countries, they are low prevalence of circumcision and high prevalence of HIV. So those are the countries where they are being prioritized. In countries like Ethiopia and Kenya, there are particular regions within those countries where circumcision programs are being rolled out. It's not across the entire country. Many of the other, because much of Kenya actually, they are circumcising communities. But in Kisumu, there were very low levels of circumcision. Therefore, most of the Kenyan circumcision program is in the Kisumu region. And in Ethiopia, they're also targeting specific regions there. But the countries are 15 because of the high prevalence of HIV and high incidence of new infections, and then low prevalence of male circumcision. Thank you.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, in the rest of the, it's not focused on outside of Africa because in the rest of the regions, the HIV burden really is most heavy in MSM, who male circumcision has been shown not necessarily to be protective if an MSM is a receptive partner, and most of them are versatile and receptive partners, so it wouldn't make a difference if they were circumcised.
What is an MSM?
An MSM is a gay man. However, recently in the last year, there was some data from China that showed that MSM actually, who undergo male circumcision, are protected. So we're going to be looking to maybe push that a little bit here as well, especially because we know that MSM, where men who have sex with men but aren't necessarily out, have female partners, and it might really be applicable in some of the communities here as well. But for now, it's really targeted to non-MSM, so heterosexual men. Any other questions? Comments? I have one. Do y'all want to close out, or do you want to ask me another question?
Any last words, I think?
Last words.
No, I think it's just reiterating the same message. The job is not done yet. We need VMMC back on the global agenda and as part of the combination prevention.
What will take us to 2030 is partnership and collaboration. So we want to call upon governments, multinationals, and civil society to work together in order for us to accelerate VMMC. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And speaking of collaboration, I wanted to, you will see on the report that we have a number of partners. This is not a report done by just the 3 organizations represented here. We have a number of them, including WHO and UNAIDS, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and others within civil society and elsewhere. JPIGO is also one of them. There are many actually who are not represented here, who are part of this work. We are showing you, this is how you collaborate to try to get the intervention out there. The job is not done, and again, male circumcision isn't, we're not saying circumcise all men and boys and go home. It is part of combination prevention. We need to roll out oral PrEP. We need to roll out CAB for PrEP, which is a new intervention. We need to roll out the preventive vaginal ring, which has been proven to work really well among women. We need to roll out, we need to ensure that people who have HIV receive treatment and they get virally suppressed, because we know that there are benefits for treatment for people who have HIV, but there are also benefits for their partners who are uninfected. So we need to roll out all of these interventions because the job is not yet done. Thank you so much.